Coming up on today's show, a violent serial killer is reawakened from its death slumber. He ends up walking many, many miles to find his next victims. And the new horror movie, In a Violent Nature. Stay tuned. Welcome to Scary World, where we walk you through the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I am your host, Arturo Padilla.
Hi.
For those of you just joining us, don't forget to subscribe up above and say what's up down below. We have one major rule around here. No spoilers. Now that we got that out of the way, there are 5 categories: production, story, ensemble, horror, and legacy. Each category can score up to 2 points.
Showtime.
Per IMDb, the synopsis goes, when a locket is removed from a collapsed fire tower in the woods that entombs the rotting corpse of Johnny, a vengeful spirit spurned on by a horrific 60-year-old crime, his body is resurrected and becomes hellbent on retrieving it. The movie was directed by Chris Nash, who is making his feature directorial debut. He made sure the movie looked good. All the shots are well composed and well executed. The sound design also helps elevate the movie. The sound is a major part of what makes this premise work and becomes a crucial element to every scene. The overall editing of the movie could have been smoother. There are a lot of cuts and it gets rather tedious on the eye. So this is where the problem lies in the production. The editing needed to be a little bit sharper, a little bit more on point and precise. There are a lot of cuts in this movie of Johnny, our serial killer, just walking and walking and walking and walking, which is fine because that's the premise of the movie, but it's just cut after cut after cut after cut of just the same thing. It gets a little tiring visually, and I think they could have done a better job just trimming down those sequences a little bit more, making everything a little bit tighter, and even making a more successful overall movie if you had shortened down the runtime. And for the hard work done on this production to make everything look good, to make everything look as neat as possible, to get the shots framed nicely, especially with all the walking and all the camera movement that is required of this premise, this movie gets a solid 1 for production. I think the director, Chris Nash, did a great job of making sure his vision of this walking serial killer was successfully translated to the screen. He does a very good job of making sure the killer is framed very nicely and right in the middle, and I think it is successful in that standpoint. Technically, this movie is a success, but the editing is what kind of brings it down because they needed to over-edit, if that makes any sense. They definitely didn't do the most they could in bringing down this runtime. Chris Nash also makes his feature script debut, and it shows, unfortunately. This is where the major issues in this movie reside. There's not much story to hold on to. What we get is very minimal and it's soulless. It doesn't add up to anything substantial at the end. There is a lot of fluff in this movie and it doesn't really cling to anything. We get a lot of walking and walking and walking, and like I said in the previous segment, I understand it because that's the premise. But even here, they lose sight of its own concept, and we never even get a proper payoff for Johnny. They decide to completely switch things around and focus on the victims, which is like, wait a minute, I thought we were doing everything from Johnny's perspective here. Why are we not getting his perspective throughout the entire movie? It makes no sense to completely change the story around and make us want to care for such very poorly written characters that we'll get to in the next segment. I feel that if they would have stuck to their guns a little bit more and stuck with Johnny all throughout the entire movie, this would have turned out better than it did. All of the walking around sounds like a neat plan on paper, but unfortunately, it didn't translate well to film. And for the very poor story structure, the very poor acts that hit no beats along the way, this movie gets a 0 for story. There's nothing here to hold on to. Everything is very empty, very soulless, as I said. And on top of that, when you completely remove the premise from the equation, you have nothing. The cast and the characters were also an afterthought in this production. The characters are underdeveloped and the cast even more underwhelming. I understand there's supposed to be fodder in these kinds of movies, but the characters were very poorly written. They're barely people. I did not like the way they structured these characters. They don't add up to anything. You don't feel for any of them. You don't even want to see them. They are just a lot of nothingness. It's very annoying because this movie has its kills and stuff like that, as any slasher movie does. But as we've seen in slasher films, we kind of focus on the characters, on the fodder, the people, the victims, you know? And having to switch roles here and focus on Johnny, the killer, makes it very interesting, but also very boring. And on top of that, the characters that we get here, the crew of friends, garbage, honestly. I'm sorry to put it so bluntly like that, but these characters were not great at all. The only properly thought of and portrayed character was Johnny, the antagonist, and he doesn't even get proper development needed to make us care for him. As I mentioned, they switch up the premise completely in the last portion of the movie, and you kind of lose sight of what the concept was and why you are in the theater to begin with. And it is to see how Johnny plays around with his food, right? We don't get that here. We get that in very minimal bursts, and it is a huge detriment to the characters, to the story, and to the overall production. And for the poorly developed and written characters and the lazy acting in this movie deserves a big fat 0 for ensemble. They were not good, they did not help. And as I mentioned, only the antagonist was good, but even then they managed to screw that one up. The highlight of this movie were the kills. They were brutal, they were gnarly, and they were all practical. And it looked really good on the screen. It did not disappoint at all, which thank goodness for that, because the rest of this movie unfortunately did. The focus of the production definitely seemed to be on the execution of the gore and these kills, aside from all the walking that we get. I do wish that we would have gotten more kills. It would have made the movie more watchable and filled the dead air with action. As I mentioned before, there is a lot of dead space, a lot of walking where nothing happens here. If we fill that nothingness with kills or with some kind of action, it would have made this thing a lot more enjoyable. There is a lot of just trekking and trekking and trekking and trekking along with Johnny, and that's fine and all if you like to watch nothing happen on the screen, but when the kills did happen, they energized me and they woke me up again. So they know how to do these things properly, and I wish they would have done more, because that was the best part of this movie aside from Johnny. And Johnny should have shined some more and killed some more, not just done a couple of wild looking things here, but just done a lot more. Quantity over quality for sure would have been better off in this situation. And even the quality that we get here, it's good, but it's like one or two of them that really stand out amongst all the kills. And for all the awesome, gnarly, practical, bloody kills and action that we get, In a Violent Nature gets a 2 for horror. As I mentioned before, I do wish they would have added more. It would have definitely hit the movie better across all categories. But what they did here was very good, and it didn't disappoint. The concept of this movie sounded like a fantastic idea. Unfortunately, the structure of the story doesn't hold up well. In fact, there's no real bones to make this story stand up to the 94-minute runtime. It's a shame because the kills were awesome, but ultimately, how our slasher gets from point A to point B is of no concern of mine, especially after this movie. And for the morsels of potential that we got in this movie, In a Violent Nature receives a 1 for legacy. I do wish they would have done a little bit more with Johnny, trimmed down this movie some more, and made this a lot more concise. I think it could have been a very awesome hour and 15-minute movie, that gets straight to the point. I don't know where they lost their direction, but it definitely comes off at the end of the movie like they completely forgot about Johnny and what they were trying to prove. So to tally it up, In a Violent Nature received a 1 for production, a 0 for story, a 0 for ensemble, a 2 for horror, and a 1 for legacy, bringing the total score up to a 4. I really wanted to enjoy this movie. I wanted to like it. I wanted to love it. When I saw the trailer, I was like, you know what? This is a great concept. What a great idea. I can't believe it hasn't been done before. And lo and behold, this is why it has not been done before, because it is not interesting. The way you make this is in a short format, not in a feature format. It gets very boring and monotonous along the way. As I said before, you get a lot of cuts of this thing just walking around. Yeah, I love the scenery, I love nature too, but there's nothing happening for a long time in this movie. And when we do get stuff, it looks really good. And that's why it's a shame that it's like, why are we not getting more stuff here? And this is why I cannot recommend this movie. It is very slow. Like I said, it's very boring. It's a snooze fest, unfortunately.
Can you tell me what time it is?
And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for watching Scary World. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and hit the thumbs up on the video. Most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell all your friends, your family, and their pets to come on down to CorpseFeed. Click on that subscribe button. We have spoiler-free horror movie reviews for you guys dropping every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also have the official CorpseFeed podcast dropping every Tuesday wherever your podcasts are streamed. Go like, subscribe, and share. Leave us a nice review. Leave us some stars. And also, go check us out on all the socials. We are everywhere, folks. Go like, subscribe, and share there as well. We will see you on Monday for another episode. And remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.